The National Communications Network, in collaboration with the National Center for Resource Development and the Ministry of Education, present CXC in Focus, a focus on the key subject areas of mathematics and English for students preparing to write the exams.
Welcome to another program, CXC Mathematics in Focus. Lesson 43, Application of Vectors. In this lesson, we will explore the application of vector method to solving geometry problems. Here is an example to show that a line joining the midpoints of two sides of a triangle is equal to half the third side and is parallel to it. Here is a triangle ABC. X is the midpoint of AC and Y is the midpoint of BC. The midpoint is halfway, and so if we look at AC, A has coordinates 1, 2, C has coordinates 5, 6. Halfway, that is X, will have coordinates 3, 4. And remember how we get 3, 4 from coordinate geometry. Add the X values. 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. To get a Y value, 6 plus 2, 8. 8 divided by 2, 4. And that's how we find the coordinates of the midpoint. Similarly for Y, we add the coordinates of B and C and divide by 2, and so Y would be, which is the midpoint, 6, 5. So let's see how to work it out. First, we find the length of AB. If we picture AB and complete a right angle triangle, that is, from B drop a perpendicular down to meet the horizontal passing through A. That will give us a right angle triangle, and apply Pythagoras' theorem, which will give us the square root of AB is equal to the square root of 6 squared plus 2 squared, which is equal to square root of 40. Square root of 40 is the same as the square root of 4 times 10. So sharing the square root over 4 times 10 will give us square root of 4 times square root of 10. Well, we know square root of 4 is 2. So AB can be expressed as 2 root 10 or 2 square root 10. Let's look at XY. From Y, drop a perpendicular to meet a line, a horizontal line going through X. That will give us a right angle triangle. And when you apply Pythagoras' theorem, xy is equal to the square root of 3 squared plus 1 squared. When that is worked out, we have xy is equal to root 10 or square root 10. So when we compare the value for AB and the value for xy, we find that xy is half of AB. That is, the length of xy is half the length of AB. Or you can say it differently, that AB is twice the length of xy. We want to show that xy is parallel to AB. So one approach is to find the gradient of xy, and the gradient of xy would be the increase in y value divided by the increase in the x value. So it is 1 over 2, which is a half. if we take the gradient of AB from the right angle triangle drawn earlier to use Pythagoras' theorem, the gradient of AB would be 2 divided by 6, which is equal to 1/3. Let me repeat the gradient of xy. The gradient of xy is 1/3, 1/3. And the gradient of AB is 1/3. So the two lines have the same gradient, that is 1/3. Once lines have the same gradient, then the lines are parallel. So we can conclude that xy is parallel to AB and is equal to half of it, that is half of AB. Let us apply the triangle law for vector addition in the following problem. Position vectors OC and OB have coordinate points B 7, 4 and C 5, 6. Determine the vector CB. The solution is on the next slide. Look at the point C. C is 5, 6. B is 7, 4. The position vector of C would be OC, joining O to C with the arrow ending at C. Position vector OB would be the arrow joining O to the point B, the arrow ending at B. If we complete the triangle to give us the arrow diagram, we move from A to C and then C to B. It will give us the same as moving from O to B. And notice where we have the arrow for CB. Starting at C, the arrow is at B. Now we know that vector OC plus vector CB is equal to vector OB, following the triangle principle. So vector CB is equal to vector OB minus vector OC, that is transposing OC to the right, which will give us vector CB. Substituting for vector OB, we have 7, 4. Substituting for vector OC, we have 5, 6. So 7, 4 minus 5, 6 will give us 2 minus 2. So vector CB is equal to 2 minus 2. Here's a question taken from June 2006 CXC Maths paper. The diagram below shows the position vectors of 2 points A and C relative to an origin O. Part A of the question. Copy and complete the diagram to show, part 1, the point B such that OABC is a parallelogram, and part 2, the vector U, where U, that is vector U, is equal to vector OA plus vector OC. And notice where C is. C is on the y-axis, and notice the point there. A is above 2 units above 6, and we draw a line from O to A, placing an arrow at A. The question continues here. Part B. Write as a column vector in the form xy the vector OA, vector OC, vector AC. Part C of the question. Given that G is the midpoint of OB, use a vector method to 1. Determine the coordinates of G, and part 2. Prove using a vector method that A, G and C lie on a straight line. Here's the solution. Part A. We were asked to copy and complete the diagram to show that B is such that AOBC is a parallelogram. And notice where we have the B. B is 4 units above A, since C is 4 units above the origin. And once we have that point, we connect C to B and we'll have the parallelogram. Part 2. Vector U is equal to vector OA plus vector OC. Look for OA. OA plus OC is vector U. Solution continues. Part B. Write as a column vector in the form xy the vector OA. OA in vector form is 6, 2. OC, just reading the coordinate points, is equal to 0, 4. And AC, vector AC, is equal to minus 6, 2. The solution continues. The coordinate of the point G. G is halfway between C and A. So if we add the coordinates of C and A and divide by 2, we will find that the coordinates of G is 3, 3. Part 2. Prove that A, G and C lie on a straight line. The solution is on the right there. GC, that is vector GC, is equal to vector OC minus vector OG. When substitution is done and the calculation complete, we will have GC, vector GC, is equal to minus 3, 1. Vector AC is equal to vector OC minus vector OA, which is equal to 6 minus 2, which can be expressed as 2 times vector 3 minus 1. And when one vector is a multiple of another vector, they are either on the same line or they are parallel. But we have to establish that they are on the same line. So we have to recognize, and this point must be made for the examiner, that the point G is common to vector GC as well as vector AC. And once you have that statement there, you can make the conclusion and say, hence A, G and C lie on a straight line. This is an alternative solution to part C. The part C, we recognize already that the point G is 3, 3, and then we want to show that A, G and C lie on a straight line. So one easy way, which is not a vector method, we find the gradient of AC, and that gradient is minus a half. Then we find the gradient of AG, which is also minus a half. And we know that G is common. And since two lines emerging from the same point, having the same gradient, we conclude that the two lines form a straight line, and hence A, G, and C are collinear or lie on a straight line. Here is your problem for today, taken from CXC January 2007. In the diagram below, M is the midpoint of ON. Part A. 1. Sketch the diagram above in your answer booklet and insert the point X on OM such that OX is equal to a half OM. Part 2. Produce Px to Q such that Px is equal to 4qx. That is, Px is equal to 4qx. Part B of the question. Write the following in terms of vector R and vector S. The arrows are missing. 1. Vector OM. 2. Vector Px. 3. Vector QM. Part C of the question. Show that vector Pn is equal to 2 times vector Pm plus vector OP. This is a problem given to you in the last lesson, taken from CXC January 2006. The points A 1, 2, B 5, 2, C 6, 4, and D 2, 4 are the vertices of a quadrilateral ABCD. Part A. Expressed in the form xy, that is vector xy, 1. The position vectors, vector OA, vector OB, vector OC, and vector OD, where O is the origin. Part 2. The vectors AB and DC, that is vector AB and vector DC. Part B. Calculate the modulus of vector AB and hence determine the unit vector in the direction of AB. Here is the solution. Vector OA is written as a column vector 1, 2. Vector OB as a column vector 5, 2. And if you look carefully at the diagram, you will see where A is, that's OA. So to reach A, we go 1 place to the right and 2 places up. OB, we go 5 places to the right, 2 places up. OC, we go 6 places to the right, 4 places up. So the vector of OC is 6, 4. Vector OD, we go 2 places to the right, 4 places up. Vector AB, see there, is equal to vector DC because they are sides of a parallelogram, which is equal to 4, 0. So if you move from A to B, you go 4 units to the right, and neither up nor down will be 0. So that is how it is written, 4, 0. The length of AB, from observation you can discover that, the length of AB or the modulus of AB is 4. So the unit vector in the direction of AB is 1, 0. That is, the vector AB divided by the modulus of vector AB, which is a quarter of 4, 0. A quarter of 4, 0 is the unit vector 1, 0. This brings us to the end of today's program, CXC Mathematics in Focus.
Students, today we will look at some of the kinds of items that are examined in Paper 1 of the CSEC English examination. These items are taken from a specimen provided by CXC for your information and guidance. It is necessary that we understand and follow the instructions carefully. In this section, you are given 90 minutes to answer 60 questions. Let us read the following directions carefully. These directions will be on the cover of your examination paper. In addition to the test booklet, you should have an answer sheet. Each item in this test has 4 suggested answers, lettered A, B, C, and D. Read each item you are about to answer and decide which answer is best. On your answer sheet, find a number which corresponds to your item and blacken the space, having the same letter as the answer you have chosen. Look at the sample item below. Choose the word or set of words that best completes each sentence. All the occupants were dash from the building before the firemen arrived. A. Extinguished. B. Evacuated. C. Released. D. Protected. The best answer to this item is evacuated. So answer space B has been blackened. If you want to change your answer, be sure to erase your old answer completely. Then fill in your new choice. When you are told to begin, turn the page and work as quickly and as carefully as you can. If you cannot answer an item, omit it and go on to the next one. You may come back to the harder item later. Your score will be the total number of correct answers. As we said before, this test consists of 60 items. You will have 90 minutes to answer them. Do not be concerned that the answer sheet provides spaces for more answers than there are items in this test. Now, let us try to work through some of the examples given. In items 1 to 4, one word is underlined. Select the option which is nearest in meaning to the underlined word and mark the corresponding space on your answer sheet. Some people, because of a lack of candor, have difficulty making friends, and the options are charm, frankness, ingenuity, and courtesy. 2. We greatly admired her for her valor, and the options are temerity, courage, spirit, and dexterity. He did everything possible to thwart the efforts of the relatives to have the will probated. Weaken, ridicule, obstruct, and defy. The Finance Committee accepted the team's recommendations for the nutrition plan because they seemed feasible and could be implemented at an early date. Lenient, logical, practicable, unique. The answer to these items are candor, B, frankness. Valor, also B, courage. Thwart, C, obstruct. And feasible, C, practicable. The answers given are the nearest in meaning to the underlined words. And these are simple. They test your knowledge of words by placing them in the context of a sentence. Now let us look at items 5 to 8. Each sentence in items 5 to 8 has either one or two words missing. Choose from the options the word or pair of words which best completes the meaning of the sentence. It was difficult for her to decide on a new dash after she had rejected the two options: alternative, opposition, objective, alteration. Nothing has been organized and confusion seemed necessary, obligatory, compulsory, or inevitable. Michael was so dash his latest detective novel that he did not hear his mother calling him at lunchtime. Disappointed with, confused by, attracted by, absorbed in. Because she had worked all day, the housekeeper was dash the task of preparing supper, barred from, deprived of, hindered from, relieved of. The answers to the above questions are A, it's alternative, D, inevitable, D, absorbed in, and also D, relieved of. Remember, students, we are looking for the best options. Questions 9 to 13 is followed by 4 options. Choose the option nearest in meaning to the original sentence. Students, you must have studied this under the heading of equivalent sentences. When Mr. Peets was transferred on promotion from South Point to Marvel, Mrs. Adams succeeded him. And that's the original sentence. Here are the options. Mrs. Adams worked at Marvel after Mr. Peets left on promotion. Mr. Peets was succeeded by Mrs. Adams when he was promoted to a post at Marvel. Both Mr. Peets and Mrs. Adams were transferred on promotion. Mr. Peets to Marvel and Mrs. Adams to South Point. In order to get promotion, Mr. Peets had to be transferred to Marvel to allow Mrs. Adams to work at South Point. The answer here is B. It is certainly the option that says nearly the same. Now let's look at another one. Recent floods have made the route impassable. And the options: people are unable to travel because of the floods. Because of heavy showers, commuters were forced to detour. The road cannot be used as a result of the floods. Traveling has been brought to a standstill because of the floods. You will recognize that C is the answer. The competitors in the long jump event were daunted by the performance of Bill Jones. Again, let's read that again. That's the original sentence. The competitors in the long jump event were daunted by the performance of Bill Jones. And the options: Bill Jones was the best participant in the long jump event. Since Bill Jones jumped so well, the other competitors in the event were discouraged. The long jump event daunted all the competitors except Bill Jones. No one expected to do better than Bill Jones in the long jump event. The answer to this one is B. Again, it says nearly the same as the original. The original sentence, number 12, an interest in their nation's development plans should be displayed by its young people. Again, an interest in their nation's development plans should be displayed by its young people. And the options, young people should take an interest in plans for national development. National development is dependent upon the youth. Young people ought to be aware of plans for the purpose of national development. The nation will advance through plans proposed by its young people. What is the answer here, students? Yes, the answer here is A. Now, in spite of their size, whales are no longer an even match for man. In spite of their size, whales are no longer an even match for man. And the options, although they are huge, whales can no longer adequately defend themselves against man. Whales are no longer even a match for man. Men are no longer a match for whales in spite of their size. Because of their size, whales should be better able to hold their own against men. The answer here is obviously A. Boys and girls, although we are working against time, we must remember to be very careful as multiple choice items can be very tricky. Questions 14 to 17 deal with sentences that are unacceptable because of inappropriate grammar, idiom, or vocabulary. Some sentences are acceptable as they stand. No sentence contains more than one inappropriate element. Identify the option A, B, or C, which makes the sentence unacceptable. If the sentence has no fault, choose option D. Number 14, a jackal, while prowling about the suburbs of a town, slipped into a tank, and not being able to get out, he lay down so that he might be taken for dead. Diving into the pool, I was shocked by the chill of the water, and I was forced to lose my grip on the ball held in my hand. Having finished all the work given him to do, he seemed more pleased with himself than usual. Did he object to obtaining the equipment I needed for the expedition? Now, number 14 has no error, so letter D will be the correct one. The answer to 15 is B. Numbers 16 and 17 contain no error, so the option D must be used. Items 18 to 20 deal with usage. The statement may be faulty in some way. Select the option A to D, which best describes the status of the question sentence. A, if the sentence is too wordy, that is, repetitive or contains redundancies. The sentence contains cliches or misused metaphor, will be identified by B. C, if the sentence has incorrect grammar or faulty diction. And D, if the sentence is acceptable as it stands. In my opinion, I think that your suggestion to upgrade housing facilities in rural areas is impractical. 19. It is his view, and one which he strongly holds, that constitutionally elected governments should not be toppled by force of arms. Question 20. Infrequently, and only on few occasions, do people declare that they are not the products of their environment. Question 18 contains redundancies, as, in my opinion and I think, suggests the same meaning. Question 19 contains no error. It therefore takes option D, correct as stands. Question 20 also contains redundancy. Infrequently and only a few occasions convey the same meaning. Hence, the letter A will be correct. Boys and girls, questions 1 to 20 test our ability to spell, recognize errors, complete sentences, deal with inappropriate grammar, etc. The 40 other questions are based on passages and poems. In our next lesson, we are going to look at some of the passages and poems that can be tested in the English A Paper 1. And until then, boys and girls, I'm Ingrid Fong saying goodbye on behalf of Bibi Ali, Parmeshwar Lal, and Ron Chichester.
The National Communications Network, in collaboration with the National Center for Resource Development and the Ministry of Education, present CXC in Focus, a focus on the key subject areas of mathematics and English for students preparing to write the exams.
Welcome to another program, CXC Mathematics in Focus. Lesson 44, Trigonometry, Graphs of sine, cosine, and tangent functions. In this lesson, we will draw the graphs of the circular functions sine, cosine, and tangent of angle theta for angle theta between minus 360 degrees and 360 degrees. The signs of trigonometric ratios depend on the quadrant in which the angle theta lies, theta being, in this case, the angle that is to be measured. When theta is 60 degrees, in the first quadrant, all the sign ratios would be positive, and that's a short way to write positive plus VE. So in the first quadrant, all sign ratios would be positive. So when theta is 60 degrees, sine of 60 degrees is equal to 0.87. Cosine of 60 degrees is equal to 0.50. And the tangent of theta, which is tangent of 60 degrees, is equal to 1.73. 120 degrees will fall in the second quadrant, and in the second quadrant only the sine ratio is positive. Cosine and tangent would be negative. So when theta is 120 degrees, sine 120 degrees is equal to 0.87. Cosine minus 50 degrees will also fall in the second quadrant, which will give us minus 0.50. And tan 120 degrees will be in the second quadrant, which will give us minus 1.73. When theta is 240 degrees, the angle will fall in the third quadrant, and in the third quadrant the tan only is positive. all the other ratios are negative. So the sine of 240 degrees, and you can use your calculator to check this out, sine 240 degrees is equal to minus 0.87. Cosine 240 degrees is equal to minus 0.50. And the tangent of 240 degrees is 1.73. Look at when theta is equal to 300 degrees. The angle will fall in the fourth quadrant. And in the fourth quadrant, only the cosine ratio is positive. So sine 300 degrees is equal to minus 0.87. Cosine 300 degrees, 0.50. And tangent of 300 degrees is minus 1.73. And notice in the last column, the third column and the fourth column, all the values with corresponding angles are the same. So you can find the relationship with sine and cosine. For example, you would recognize that sine of 60 is the same as sine of 120, is the same as sine of 240 minus the sine of 240, and sine of 300 is minus the sine of 240. If you take the cosine, that is the fourth column, cosine of 60 is the same as the cosine of 300. The cosine of 120 is the same as the cosine of 240. And look at the tangent ratio. The tangent of 60 degrees is the same as the tangent of 240 degrees. And the tangent of 120 degrees is the same as the tangent of 300 degrees. By plotting the values of y against the corresponding values of theta, the graph of y is equal to sine theta for theta from 0 degrees to 360 degrees is obtained. Look at the graph. The sine graph, the red curve, is the graph of y is equal to sine theta. And on the theta line, usually we call it the x line or the x-axis, we have the values of theta. You can recognize 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, and 360 degrees. Notice this sine curve is like a wave. From 0, it bulges up to a maximum point of 1, then falls down, passes through 0 at 180, bulges down at the bottom to a minimum value of minus 1, then climbs up to reach the x-axis or the theta axis at 360 degrees. When we have a graph like this, for any given angle on the theta axis, we can draw a vertical line to touch the curve and then draw a horizontal line to the y-axis and read off the value, and that will give you the value of the sine of an angle marked on the x-axis or the theta axis. And notice an important relationship, an important result from the sine function as you see there. The sine value will range from minus 1, which is below, to plus 1, which is at the top. In other words, there is a maximum and a minimum, the maximum being 1, the minimum being minus 1. By plotting the values of y against the corresponding values of theta, the graph of y is equal to cos theta for theta between 0 degree and 360 degrees is obtained. Look here, the red line in this case is the graph of the equation y is equal to cosine theta. At 0 on the theta axis, we have a value of cos theta as 1. So, the cosine graph starts at 1, slopes downward to 90 degrees on the theta axis. So, cosine of 90 is 0. Then you keep sloping down to a minimum value of minus 1. The graph turns up at that point, and cosine 180 degrees is equal to minus 1. So, we turn up, we cross the theta axis at 270, which is saying that the cosine of 270 degrees is equal to 0, and we continue with our graph climbing up to a maximum of 1 at 360 degrees. Notice that 0 to 90 is your first quadrant, 90 to 180 is your second quadrant, and you go on like that. So, when you look at the cosine value, 0 to 90, the cosine is positive, you are seeing that. Between 90 and 270, the cosine value is negative, and between 270 and 360, the cosine is positive. And these are relationships you need to note, especially when you will be given graphs of trig problems in paper 1, that just by looking you must be able to identify the answer from the 4 options given. Let's compare and contrast the graphs of sine and cosine in the range 0 degrees to 360 degrees. The graph above, the first one at the top there, is the graph of the sine function, and the graph below is the graph of the cosine function. And there are some important results you need to note. In case of sine graph, the starting point is at 0, whereas with the cosine graph, the starting point is 1. Notice the value at 90. You see an arrow coming down. The value of 90, that is the sine of 90, is 1, but the cosine of 90 is 0. Keep going to your right. At 180, the sine of 180 is 0, and the cosine of 180 is minus 1. Look at what is happening at 360. The sine of 360 is 0, and the cosine of 360 is 1. And you can spot those from the graphical presentation. So, if you see that in your examination paper, you are quickly able to determine which is the correct answer. By plotting the values of y against the corresponding values of theta, the graph of y is equal to tan theta in the range theta greater than or equal to 0 but less than or equal to 360 degrees is obtained. And here is a hand-drawn graph of the tan function. The first graph, notice the first part of the curve starting at 0 and climbing up towards the 90 degrees line. Now, when you use your calculator, you can check that if you find the tangent of 87, try to get close to 90. If you try tan of 87, you'll find you have a very large number. If you try 88, the number is still larger. If you try 89, it's still larger. If you try 89.999, it is a very, very large number. If you go a little to the right of 90 degrees and say you find on your calculator tan of 90.00001, you'd find that your answer is an extremely large value but negative. And that's why you see as we pass 90, the tangent of angle in that quadrant starts from way down the negative point coming up. And if we keep testing using our calculator for the values, and you have rail graph paper and you plot the graph, you'll end up that as you find values going closer to 180 degrees, that is tan of angles going to 180 degrees, you get closer and closer to 0. And when you check tan of 180 degrees, you'll find that your answer is 0. So the graph cuts the theta axis at 0 there. And for other values, you go up and up. Going past 270, you start with negative values for tangent. Going towards 270, the tangent will be large positive values. Now, the 90 degree line and the 270 degree line, they are called asymptotes, or later you will find they are lines of symmetry. Some important points on a graph of the tangent function. First point you need to note, unlike the sine graph and the cosine graph, there are no maximum or minimum values for tan theta or the tangent graph. So tan theta can take any real value, meaning any value, positive or negative. The second point you need to note, the curve approaches the line theta equal 90 degrees and theta equal 270 degrees. Remember, it is approaching, the curve is approaching the line. It will never ever reach those two lines. Such lines are called asymptotes. The third point you need to note, the curve is not continuous. That is, the curve breaks at theta is equal to 90 degrees and theta is equal to 270 degrees. And at those points, the function is termed undefined. So we say that the tangent function is undefined at theta equal 90 and theta equal 270 degrees. Here is your problem for today. Part 1 of the question. Given that y is equal to 2 minus cos x, copy and complete the table below. We have started it. The examiner is giving you some help. So you have the x values 0, 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and 180. You have the y values. Some are missing, but some are given. Corresponding to 30 degrees, you have 1.1. Corresponding to 60 degrees, you have 1.5. Corresponding to 120 degrees, you have 2.5. Corresponding to 180 degrees, you have 3. Part 2 of the question. Using a scale of 2 cm to represent 30 degrees on the x-axis and 1 cm to represent 0.2 cm on the y-axis, draw the graph of y is equal to 2 minus cos x for x in the range 0 degrees to 180 degrees. Part 2 of the question. Using the graph or otherwise, determine the value of x for which 2 minus cos x is equal to 1.8. This question is taken from CXC January 2005. This is the problem given to you in the last lesson. In the diagram below, M is the midpoint of ON. A, part 1. Sketch the diagram above in your answer booklet and insert the point X on OM such that OX is equal to a half OM. Figure that one out. Read that for you again. Sketch the diagram above in your answer booklet and insert the point X on vector OM such that vector OX is equal to half vector OM. Part 2. Produce Px to Q such that vector Px is equal to 4 times vector Qx. I think there is an error here. It's supposed to be xq. As we go, we'll see. Part B of the question. Write the following in terms of vector r and vector s. Part 1, vector OM. Part 2, vector Px. Part 3, vector Qm. Part C. Show that vector Pn is equal to 2 times vector Pm plus vector OP. CXC January 2007. Here is a solution. Insert the point X on OM such that OX, vector OX is equal to half vector OM. On the diagram, you see that you have Px there. Px is equal to 4xq. Vector Px is equal to 4 times vector xq. The solution continues. In terms of vector r and vector s, vector OM is equal to vector r plus vector s. Look at OM, and if we follow the triangular law for vector addition, you will conclude that vector OM is equal to vector r plus vector s. Part 2. Vector Px is equal to vector Ox minus vector Op, which is equal to vector Ox is equal to 1/3 vector Om minus Op, and that will give us 1/3 vector Om is r plus s minus, instead of OP, we substitute vector r, which will give us minus 2/3 vector r plus 1/3 vector s. Part 3. Vector qm is equal to vector qx plus vector xm, which is equal to a quarter vector px plus 2/3 vector om. By substitution, we will have vector qm is equal to a quarter into minus 2/3 r vector r plus 1/3 vector s close bracket plus 2/3 open bracket vector r plus vector s close brackets, and when the left hand side is simplified, that is equal to a quarter into 2 times vector r plus 3 times vector s. Part C. Show that vector Pn is equal to 2 times vector Pm plus vector OP. In triangle MNP, notice that triangle there, vector MP plus vector Pn is equal to vector Mn. Triangle law for vector addition. Substituting for MP, vector MP, we have minus s, because MP is the reverse of Pm. So we have minus s plus Pn is equal to vector Mn. Minus vector s plus vector Pn is equal to vector s plus vector r. So vector Pn is equal to, transposing minus s from the left to the right, we will have 2 times vector s plus vector r. Now matching, we find that Pn is equal to 2 times vector Pm, because Pm is s, plus vector OP, which is the same as r, and hence we have proved to the examiner that vector Pn is equal to 2 times vector Pm plus vector OP. This brings us to the end of today's program, CXC Mathematics in Focus.
In today's lesson, we will continue to look at some of the kinds of items that may be examined in Paper 1 of the English A examination. Today's focus will be passages and poems. Let us read the following extract carefully, and then we'll attempt to answer items 20 to 27 on the basis of what is asked, stated, or implied. The main argument in favor of keeping the death penalty for murder is that it will frighten men out of the desire to commit the crime. In other words, it will act as a preventive. It is curious that the more ineffective it is in this way, that is, the more murders actually take place, the more the defenders of capital punishment cry for it to be kept. 2 reasons at least account for its ineffectiveness as a preventive. The first is that few men, when they commit murder, either know clearly what they are doing or are in sufficient control of themselves to mind what will follow. The second is that figures show that for every 11 murders committed, only 1 man is executed, so that a murderer who calculates the chances may well decide to take the risk. Society can best show its horror at murder by refusing to imitate it in the name of justice. Question 20 asks, to frighten men out of the desire, in line 2, presents the view that A. Desire can be counteracted by fear. B. Fear is the strongest emotion that men possess. C. Fear causes great desire in men. D. Desire is man's weakest emotion. The answer here is A. Desire can be counteracted by fear. Question 21. Preventive, as used in line 2 of the extract, means A. Law, B. Precaution, C. Deterrent, D. Terror. Here we are asked for meaning in the context. The answer then is C, as a deterrent. Question 22 asks, the writer mentions statistics in line 7 to 8 of the extract in order to A. Convince the reader that the death penalty encourages murder. B. Inform us that the number of murderers receiving the death penalty has increased. C. Impress the reader with his knowledge of the law regarding the death penalty. D. Show that most murderers are not given the death penalty. The answer is D. The term calculate the chances as used in line 8 means computes the score, works out the odds, thinks about the opportunities, predicts the future. Again, we are looking at meaning in context. Thus, the answer is B, works out the odds. 24. In the last sentence of the extract, lines 9 to 10, the writer is expressing the view that A. Murders are increasing because society is influenced by the courts. B. Society should not regard the death penalty as justice, but as murder. People have a desire to imitate what they see and therefore commit murder. And D. Courts of justice should prevent people from committing the horrible crime of murder. The answer here is B. Society should not regard the death penalty as justice, but as murder. 25. According to the extract, which of the following is not given as a reason for the death penalty being effective as a deterrent? A. Only 11 murderers are caught and executed. B. Murderers feel that they are unlikely to be executed. C. Only 1 out of every 11 murderers is executed. And D. Most murderers lack the control during the act to care about the consequences. A is the answer. Only 11 murderers are caught and executed. 26. The style of writing in this extract can best be described as descriptive, factual, argumentative, or narrative. Certainly, boys and girls, this style of writing can best be described as argumentative. You will remember this style from your persuasive writing. 27. The writer uses the sentence, the first is that, to decide to take the risk, lines 5 to 9, in order to A. Convince the reader that the death penalty is ineffective, persuade the reader that only 1 out of every 11 murderers is executed, show the reader the adverse effects of crime, D. Inform the reader how a would-be killer might think. The writer is trying to convince the reader that the death penalty is insufficient, so we must shade letter A. Now we will answer 5 questions based on this advertisement. Good looks. I should like to meet that person. How often have we all said this about someone we have just seen for the first time, but about whom we know absolutely nothing? Few of us can explain this instantaneous attraction at first sight. it is due to clothes, figure, manner, or just that he or she is our type, the person we dream about. Possibly all these things count, but the first impulse is surely due to what we so easily call looks. Not necessarily good looks, but certainly clear and healthy looks. How do they come by that look which makes everyone want to know them? Maybe they're just born that way, or perhaps they have cleared away unsightly spots and skin blemishes and improved their complexion by taking a course in Clark's blood mixture with its 6 active ingredients. If you are fortunate enough to have a naturally healthy complexion, you should treasure it. If you are not so lucky and are troubled with spots and boils and other skin blemishes, do as many others have done and start taking a course in Clark's blood mixture right away. It is available from all good chemists in 3 sizes. Prices $2, $3, and $4. It's a personal hint that's well worth taking. Now for our questions. 28. Good looks as used in the title of the advertisement refers to A. A well-formed figure, good taste in clothes, B. C. A healthy complexion, D. Poise and fitness. Again, students, we are asked to give meaning from context. So the answer is obviously C. A healthy complexion. The writer mentions that Clark's blood mixture contains 6 active ingredients in order to A. Show the care that goes into making the mixture, B. Prove that it is superior to other similar products, C. Impress the reader with the excellence of the ingredients which the mixture contains, and D. Imply that the mixture is a very powerful one. The answer here is certainly D. Imply that the mixture is a very powerful one. Question 30 asks, the main appeal of the advertisement is to stimulate people's desire to be A. Popular, B. Attractive, C. Successful, D. Wealthy. The answer here is B. Attractive. Question 31. This advertisement attempts to persuade the reader by the use of A. Rhetorical questions, B. Statistics, C. Quotations from consumers, and D. Scientific formulas. The answer to this question is A. Rhetorical questions. The final question in this advertisement is, the main intention of the advertiser is to A. Make people become better looking, cause people to be more aware of the necessity for good skin care, C. Inform us that Clark's blood mixture is the only cure for skin problems, D. Encourage us to buy Clark's blood mixture for unhealthy skin. The answer here is D. To encourage us to buy Clark's blood mixture for unhealthy skin. We're going to conclude our lesson by looking at one poem. Let us read the following poem carefully and then answer on the basis of what is stated or implied. This poem is entitled Touch. When I get out, I'm going to ask someone to touch me. Very gently, please, and slowly. Touch me. I want to learn again how life feels. I've not been touched for 7 years. For 7 years, I've been untouched, out of touch again. And I've learned to know now the meaning of untouchable. Untouched. Not quite. I can count the things that have touched me. 1. fists at the beginning, fierce, mad fists, till I remember screaming, "Don't touch me, please, don't touch me." 2. Pause. The first 4 years of pause every day, patting paws, searching arms up, shoes off, legs apart, prodding paws, systematic, heavy, indifferent, probing away all privacy. I don't want fists and paws. I want to be touched and to touch. I want to feel alive again. I want to say when I get out, "Here I am, please touch me." Question 28 asks, a reading of the poem suggests that the location from which the poet is writing is A. a hospital, B. a prison, C. the army, D. home. The answer here is clearly B. The poet is in prison. 29. Which of the following is not used in the poem to bring out the inhumanity of the authorities? A. Untouchable, B. Mad fists, C. Prodding paws, D. Indifferent. Here the answer is A. Untouchable, in line 18. Question 30. The phrase "probing away all privacy" in lines 37 to 38 suggests that the poet A. had no time for social activities, B. was forced to reveal everything he knew, C. was degraded by the treatment he received, D. had the details of his personal life exposed to everyone. Answer: probing away all privacy in this context means the same as C. He was degraded by the treatment he received. Which of the following is not suggested by the actions described in lines 29 to 39? A. The authorities showed a callous attitude towards the poet. B. The poet considered the touching to be repulsive. C. There was a hint of tenderness in the behavior of the authorities. D. The authorities used repetitive and thorough procedures. The answer is C. Number 32. The difference in rhythm between lines 1 to 9 and lines 30 to 38 helps to indicate that in lines 1 to 9, the poet A longs for tenderness, while in lines 30 to 38, he denounces a brutal system. B is afraid to speak out, but in lines 30 to 38, he's maddened by rough treatment. C is being penitent, when in lines 30 to 38, he has become hardened by the system. And D is bewildered by his surroundings, but in 30 to 38, he desperately wants to get out. The answer here is A. He longs for tenderness, while he denounces a brutal system. Question 33. The word that can best be used to describe the mood of the poet: A. Hostility, B. Yearning, C. Annoyance, D. Depression. The answer is B. Yearning. Yearning best describes the mood of the poet. Students, we will now look at the final question. Which of the following is not suggested by the word pause as used in lines 29 to 39? A. The authorities behaved like animals towards the poet. B. Searching involved intimate and repulsive touching. C. The authorities had become callous. D. The inhumane conditions made the poet become like an animal. The answer is certainly D. Remember, the question asks for the one that is not suggested by the poet. Again, I must remind you to read the questions carefully. Boys and girls, this concludes lesson 44. And on behalf of the team, Bibi Ali, Parmeshwar Lal and Ron Chichester, I'm Ingrid Pound saying see you next time.